$100. That's it. That's the entire premise of this video. And I need you to actually sit with that number for a second before you decide it's not worth your time. Because I promise you, by the end of this video, you're going to feel a little sick about every $100 you've casually spent and forgotten about in the last 5 years. Here's a scenario. You're 25 years old. You open an investment account and you commit to putting in exactly $100 every single month. Not $1,000, not $500, $100. The same amount most people spend on takeout in a week without thinking twice about it. You do this every month without fail for the next 40 years, investing in a simple, boring index fund that tracks the overall stock market. You don't try to time the market, you don't chase hot stocks, you just show up every month like clockwork and put in your $100. By the time you retire, how much money do you think you'd actually have? Most people guess somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000. That feels intuitive, right? $100 a month for 40 years is roughly $48,000 total that you actually put in. So most people assume the final number lands somewhere close to that, maybe a little higher if the market was kind to you. The real answer is over $350,000. From $100 a month. And almost nobody believes that number the first time they hear it, which is exactly the problem this video is going to fix. My name is David, and I spend way too much time thinking about why the math of investing feels so unbelievable to most people, even when it's not complicated at all. If small, consistent numbers have ever felt too small to matter to you, this video is going to completely change how you think about that. Stick around and hit subscribe if you want more of this. Let's break down exactly why this happens, because understanding the mechanism is more valuable than just hearing the final number. The first thing you need to understand is the difference between what you actually contribute and what your money eventually becomes. Over 40 years, contributing $100 a month, you personally put in a total of $48,000. That's your actual out-of-pocket contribution, the money that came directly from your paycheck. But the final balance, assuming a reasonable average annual return of around 8%, which is roughly what the stock market has historically returned over long periods, comes out to approximately $353,000. That means over $300,000, the overwhelming majority of your final balance, isn't money you ever actually earned through a job. It's money your money made on its own, while you were living your life, completely unaware that it was happening in the background. This is the part almost nobody intuitively understands, and it's the entire reason compound growth feels like magic, even though it's just math. In the early years, your contributions are doing almost all of the work. If you invest $100 a month for the first 5 years, you'll have around $6,500. And honestly, most of that is just the money you put in, with only a small amount of actual growth on top. At this stage, it feels slow. It feels almost pointless. A lot of people quit right here because the numbers genuinely don't look impressive yet. But here's where everything changes, and it happens quietly enough that most people miss the moment it starts. By year 20, that same $100 a month has grown to roughly $59,000. You've only contributed $24,000 out of your own pocket by this point, which means your investment has already generated about $35,000 in growth on its own, more than the amount you actually put in. This is the moment where your money starts working harder than you do. From this point forward, the growth accelerates in a way that feels almost unfair if you're the one who's been patient enough to get here. By year 30, that number jumps to approximately $150,000. And by year 40, it more than doubles again to that final number of roughly $353,000. Look at the shape of that growth for a second. It took 20 years to go from basically nothing to $59,000. But it only took another 20 years to go from $59,000 all the way up to $353,000. The second half of the journey generates almost 5 times more growth than the first half. Using the exact same monthly contribution, the exact same amount of effort, The exact same $100. That's the part of compound interest that almost nobody feels intuitively, because our brains are wired to expect steady, linear progress. We expect that if year 1 produces a small amount of growth, year 40 should produce roughly 40 times that amount, in a straight line. But compound growth doesn't work in a straight line. It works exponentially, which means the majority of the actual wealth gets built in the later years, specifically because your earlier contributions have had decades to compound on top of themselves. Here's what makes this even more powerful, and it's something most people never think about. What if, instead of $100, you had started with just $50 more per month, at $150 total? That relatively small increase doesn't just add 50% more to your final balance. Because of how compounding works, that additional $50 a month invested for the same 40 years adds an extra $176,000 to your final total, bringing you to roughly $529,000. A 50% increase in your monthly contribution produces exactly a 50% increase in your final balance, because the math scales proportionally. But seeing the actual dollar impact, an extra $176,000 from just $50 extra a month, is what makes this feel real in a way that percentages never quite do. Now, here's the part of this video where I need to be honest with you, because there's a mistake almost everyone makes when they hear numbers like this, and it's the same mistake that keeps people from actually following through on this strategy. People hear that $100 a month can turn into over $350,000, and their brain immediately jumps to, well, then I should just wait until I have more money to invest and start with something bigger later. This is, without exaggeration, the single most expensive financial mistake you can make with this information, and here's exactly why. Time in the market matters dramatically more than the amount of money you start with. If you wait even 5 years to start, pushing your start date from age 25 to age 30, your final balance at retirement drops from $353,000 down to roughly $237,000, a loss of over $116,000, just from waiting 5 years, even if you invest the exact same $100 a month once you finally start. That's not a small penalty for waiting. That's over $100,000 gone permanently, simply because those 5 years of compounding can never be recovered, no matter how much extra money you throw at the problem later. This is why financial advisors constantly repeat the phrase, time in the market beats timing the market, and why starting small immediately will almost always outperform waiting to start big later. So let's bring this back to something practical, because understanding the math is only useful if it actually changes what you do next. If $100 a month genuinely feels out of reach for you right now, that's completely understandable, and I'm not going to pretend everyone has that flexibility in their budget. But here's what I want you to actually sit with. $100 a month works out to about $3.30 a day. That's less than most people spend on a single coffee, a fast food combo meal, or a handful of app subscriptions they forgot they were even paying for. This isn't about deprivation or never enjoying your money. It's about recognizing that the difference between building genuine long-term wealth and not building it often isn't about earning more money. It's about redirecting an amount smaller than most people's daily coffee habit into something that compounds for decades instead of disappearing the moment it's spent. And here's the final thought I want to leave you with, because I think it's the most important idea in this entire video. The hardest part of this entire strategy isn't the math. The math is simple and honestly kind of beautiful once you actually understand it. The hardest part is psychological. It's staying consistent through the first 10 or 15 years when the numbers still look unimpressive, when it genuinely feels like nothing meaningful is happening, when it would be easy to convince yourself that $100 a month is too small to bother continuing. But those unglamorous, boring years are exactly what make the explosive later years possible. There is no shortcut to skip that part. There's only showing up every single month, especially when it doesn't feel like it's working yet. If this changed how you think about small, consistent amounts of money, subscribe, because next we're breaking down exactly how to actually set this up, step by step, so you can start today instead of waiting for a better time that's costing you more than you realize.